You're standing at an optical counter, holding a pair of frames that just scanned for $800. Somewhere on the other side of the planet, right now, a machine just finished stamping out the same frame, same mold, same production line for $3. Not a knockoff, not a cheap imitation. The actual same piece of plastic and glass, minus a logo. Ship it out under a different label online. It sells for $95. Stitch a designer name onto the arm. It sells for $800. The same $800 you're about to pay. Not double the price. Not 10 times the price. Nearly 270 times what it cost to make. One company controls almost every single step of that markup. From the factory floor to the insurance card sitting in your wallet right now. And until very recently, almost nobody outside the industry even knew its name. That company is worth close to $165 billion at its peak. And right now, in factory towns most people have never heard of. It's being challenged in a way it hasn't faced in over a decade. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how a $3 pair of glasses threatens an empire this size, and why the giant's own response to that threat might be the most interesting part of this entire story. Two things are colliding here, and almost nobody covering this connected them properly. I want one word from you at the end. Crushed or cornered. You'll know exactly which one you believe. Let's get into it. Here's the company at the center of this story. EssilorLuxottica. A French-Italian conglomerate that most people have genuinely never heard of, even though it almost certainly made the glasses on your own face right now. It owns Ray-Ban. It owns Oakley. It owns LensCrafters, Sunglass Hut, Pearl Vision, and Target Optical. It manufactures eyewear under license for Chanel, Prada, Versace, Giorgio Armani, Michael Kors, Tiffany, and dozens of other luxury names you'd never guess were made in the same factory complex. In total, the company controls somewhere around 80% of global eyewear brands, produces more than 1 billion glasses and lenses every single year, and runs over 600 factories and more than 17,000 retail stores worldwide. A footprint so large that its largest actual competitor operates barely 500 stores by comparison. To understand exactly how ruthless this company can be when it feels threatened, you need to know two stories, because they explain everything about how it thinks. The man who built it, Leonardo Del Vecchio, was born in Milan in 1935. His father, a fruit peddler, died before he was born. His mother had 4 other children and no way to feed a 5th, so at age 7 she handed him over to a Catholic orphanage. He lived under the nuns' strict routine for 7 years, out on the street at 14, apprenticed to a tool and metal engraving factory to help support the family he'd left behind. That's where he learned precision metalwork, the exact skill that would eventually let him start making tiny eyeglass parts in a small mountain town called Agordo, at 25 years old, with 14 employees and a single obsession: never be poor again. By the time he died in 2022, he was worth roughly $25 billion, and he'd said the actual business model out loud, in his own words, more than once. "You get rich," he said, "by selling $2 sunglasses for $150 and aggressively buying out your competition." He wasn't exaggerating. Watch what happened to Oakley. In the 1990s, Oakley was a genuine competitor, athlete-endorsed, culturally cool, growing fast, and it had the nerve to disagree with Luxottica over pricing terms. Luxottica's response was immediate and total. It pulled every single Oakley product off the shelves of every store it owned, Sunglass Hut, LensCrafters, all of it, overnight. Oakley's stock price collapsed by 1/3 within weeks. With its biggest retail channel gone and no way to recover the lost ground, Oakley had nowhere left to go. In 2007, Luxottica came back and bought the company outright for $2.1 billion. Then it put Oakley's products right back on the same shelves it had just ripped them from, and raised the prices. That's not a metaphor for how this company operates. That's a literal, documented example of it. Here's what that model actually looks like on the ground for regular consumers today. A former LensCrafters founder who toured Chinese eyewear factories reported that quality frames cost between $4 and $8 to produce. Designer quality frames, the kind carrying a Prada or Chanel label, run around $15. First quality lenses cost about $1.25 each. Those same frames and lenses, once they reach an American optical counter, sell for around $800. He called it, in his own words, a complete rip-off, and a supplier who provided a fifth of LensCrafters' own inventory before it was absorbed into the larger company, backed him up publicly. And because one company owns the factory, the brand, the retail store, and in many cases the vision insurance plan processing your claim, there's genuinely nowhere else for that markup to get challenged. When one company owns every single link in the chain, the market price is whatever that company decides it should be, and there's no competing retailer down the street buying from a different supplier to undercut it. Because in a very real sense, almost every supplier eventually leads back to the same parent company anyway. So now let's talk about where those $3 to $8 frames actually come from. Because this is where the real disruption in this story begins. There's a city in Jiangsu Province, China, called Danyang, that almost nobody outside the eyewear industry has ever heard of, and it produces more of the world's eyeglass lenses than anywhere else on the planet. Danyang makes somewhere between 400 and 800 million lenses every single year, accounting for roughly half of all lens production on Earth. There's a saying inside the industry that 1 out of every 2 people wearing glasses anywhere in the world is wearing lenses that came out of this one city. Danyang alone hosts more than 1,600 eyewear-related enterprises and over 50,000 workers, spread across a manufacturing cluster that took roughly 5 decades to grow from a handful of small workshops into a fully integrated industrial supply chain. And sourcing data shows budget sunglasses coming out of these factories for as little as $1.50 to $3 per unit, shipped straight from the factory door. What started in Danyang as fairly basic, low-tech production in the 80s has since evolved into precision manufacturing capable of blue light filtering, micron-level grinding, and multi-layer optical coatings, the exact kind of technical capability that used to be treated as a Western manufacturing advantage, not a Chinese one. For decades, that manufacturing base mostly stayed invisible to regular consumers, because it fed into exactly the kind of vertically integrated supply chain EssilorLuxottica controls. The frames got made cheap in China, then flowed through European and American brand names, retail markups, and insurance systems that turned a $4 cost into an $800 price tag, with almost none of that markup ever making its way back to the factory that actually built the product. That's the quiet part of this entire industry most consumers genuinely never think about. When you walk into an optical store and pick out a frame, you're not really paying for $4 of plastic and hinges. You're paying for the brand license, the retail lease, the sales commission, the insurance processing fee, and the profit margin of a conglomerate that owns essentially every single step in between you and that factory floor. What's changed is that direct-to-consumer brands have started cutting that entire chain out completely. Companies sourcing straight from cities like Danyang and Wenzhou, another major Chinese eyewear manufacturing hub known for high-volume, automated frame production, are selling essentially the same quality frames and lenses directly to customers online, without a Fortune Global 500 conglomerate sitting in the middle, collecting a 260 times markup along the way. Some of these direct sourcing operations are selling complete pairs, frame and prescription lens included, for under $10, a price point that simply wasn't accessible to ordinary consumers even 5 years ago, before global shipping infrastructure and online payment systems made buying straight from a Chinese factory floor as easy as ordering from a mall storefront. That's shock number one in this story. The actual manufacturing base the entire $800 industry was built on top of is now available directly to anyone with a website and a shipping account. And here's where the two shocks in this story actually collide. And it's the part almost nobody covering this connected properly. While cheap, factory direct competition has been quietly eating away at the bottom of EssilorLuxottica's business, the company's own public numbers show real strain. Its stock price has fallen sharply over the past year, down more than 30% from earlier highs, and pushing its market value down from a peak near $165 billion to closer to $90 billion in the middle of this year. The company's own third-quarter results specifically flagged worsening economic conditions in China as a direct drag on sales, alongside a negative sunglasses performance in North America. This isn't speculation about a threat that might come someday. This is a 100-year-old near-monopoly conglomerate publicly acknowledging that its business in exactly the region making $3 glasses is getting harder. In real time, in its own earnings reports, read out loud on investor calls by its own executives, not inferred by outside analysts guessing at what's happening behind closed doors. But here's the part of this story that makes it genuinely more interesting than a simple giant gets disrupted narrative. And it's exactly what a company this size does when its cheapest, most commodity products stop being profitable enough to defend. It doesn't fight for the $3 frame market. It abandons it and moves the entire business somewhere the $3 competitor genuinely cannot follow. EssilorLuxottica's biggest growth story right now isn't regular prescription glasses at all. It's smart glasses, built through a partnership with Meta under the Ray-Ban name. The company sold roughly 2 million of these connected camera and AI-equipped glasses combined across 2023 and 2024. In 2025 alone, that number jumped to 7 million units, and the company is racing toward a production capacity of 10 to 20 million units a year. Smart glasses already account for more than a third of the company's entire quarterly revenue growth, and roughly 1 in 5 buyers are opting for prescription lenses inside them too, meaning this new product line isn't replacing the old optical business. It's actively absorbing it. Meta's own co-founder has even discussed the possibility of taking a minority stake in the company directly, tightening that partnership even further, while the company has also quietly built a stake in the Japanese optics giant Nikon, adding advanced lens technology firepower to a hardware category it clearly intends to dominate for the next decade, not just the next product cycle. Think about what that strategy actually means. A $3 frame from a factory in Danyang can compete on basic prescription glasses all day long. It cannot compete on a pair of glasses with a built-in camera, microphone, AI assistant, and a direct software partnership with one of the largest technology companies on Earth. EssilorLuxottica isn't trying to out-cheap the cheap competition anymore. It's trying to make the entire commodity category irrelevant by building something the $3 factory simply doesn't have the technology stack to replicate, at least not yet. It's a strategy that mirrors what plenty of other industries have already lived through. When manufacturing gets commoditized and margins get squeezed from below, the company holding the brand and the distribution network doesn't usually fight to the bottom. It moves up into a category where owning the software, the platform, and the customer relationship matters more than owning the cheapest factory. So let's be precise about what genuinely happened here, and what didn't. Because both the China is destroying the monopoly narrative and the nothing's really changing here dismissal are each missing real pieces of this story. Here's what's true, and it matters for keeping perspective. The $800 markup on basic prescription frames is real, well-documented, and increasingly exposed by direct factory competition that didn't meaningfully exist for regular consumers a decade ago. EssilorLuxottica's stock decline and its own acknowledgement of weakening China sales are real, verifiable, public numbers, not speculation. But here's what the destruction narrative gets wrong. EssilorLuxottica still controls roughly 80% of global eyewear brands, still owns the retail networks, still owns large parts of the insurance infrastructure that decides what your vision benefits will actually cover, and is now building an entirely new, higher-margin product category that a $3 factory frame realistically cannot touch for years, possibly ever. The commodity end of this business is genuinely under real pressure. The empire built around brand, retail control, and now advanced hardware is adapting faster than most disruption stories give it credit for. Analysts covering the stock still largely rated a buy, with average price targets sitting well above where the stock currently trades. A sign that professional investors see the recent slide as a rough patch tied mostly to China and sunglasses softness, not evidence the underlying empire is actually collapsing. So where does this actually go from here? Watch whether direct-to-consumer brands sourcing from Danyang and Wenzhou can actually build real brand trust at scale. Because cheap manufacturing alone has never been enough to topple an entrenched retail and insurance network on its own, the same way it wasn't enough for dozens of challenger brands before them, from Warby Parker's earlier, more modest push into the same territory a decade ago onward. Watch EssilorLuxottica's smart glasses production numbers closely too, because if that category really does scale toward the 10 to 20 million unit range the company is targeting, it could functionally replace the commodity glasses revenue getting squeezed out from underneath it, turning this from an existential threat into a successful pivot the same way plenty of legacy companies have used a new platform to outrun a shrinking core business before. And watch what happens to EssilorLuxottica's stock and its China-specific sales numbers over the next few quarters, because that's the most honest, hardest-to-fake signal of whether this pressure is a temporary dip or the start of something structural. If China sales keep softening while smart glasses keep accelerating, that tells you the company successfully found its escape route. If both numbers stay weak at the same time, that tells you something considerably more serious about the whole strategy. Let's bring this together because individually these are just numbers, but stacked on top of each other, they tell you exactly what's actually happening here. $3 to $8. What it actually costs to manufacture a quality eyeglass frame in China. $800. What that same frame typically sells for at an American optical counter. 80%. The share of global eyewear brands controlled by one single company. 400 to 800 million lenses a year. What one Chinese city alone produces is roughly half the entire world's supply. $165 billion. That company's peak market value. $90 billion. Roughly what it's worth now, after more than 30% of that value evaporated over the past year. 7 million units. How many Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses the company sold in 2025 alone, up from 2 million the 2 years before combined. Individually, these are just facts about a factory town in Jiangsu province and a stock chart in Paris. Together, they describe a 100-year-old monopoly getting squeezed from below by $3 competition and racing to build a new empire in smart hardware before that squeeze reaches all the way to the top. If this video actually helped you understand what's really happening underneath this headline better than the panic or the dismissal did, hit subscribe right now, because I'm tracking exactly how this pricing war and this smart glasses pivot play out over the coming months. And you don't want to be the last one to find out. Drop a comment with one word: crushed. If you think China's cheap manufacturing genuinely breaks this monopoly's grip. Cornered. If you think the giant simply moves the fight somewhere the competition can't follow. I'm reading every single one of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.